Welcome. Welcome to the Thinking Green TV show. My name is Michael Harris, and I'm a guest host. I haven't done this in a while, but I'm so very pleased to put together a little show tonight to update our viewers about the latest news regarding climate chaos. And the first thing I want to say is that I use the term climate chaos rather than climate change because I think it at least hints at the enormity of the situation. And the program tonight, we have with us via Skype Dr. Guy McPherson. And if you have been on the internet or been around and involved in this topic at all for the last, I'd say, a few years at least, you may be familiar with his work. Guy, why don't you say hello, and how are you doing tonight? Where are you calling in from?
Well, thanks for having me on the show, Michael. I appreciate it. I'm calling from my home in southern New Mexico. I call my home the Mud Hut because it's a straw bale house, and so the interior walls are just caked with mud, pulled right out of the ground right here in front of the house.
They look good from the view that I have of you. The walls look pretty normal.
It's an absolutely beautiful house and a beautiful setting.
So thank you for calling in. We're also going to be joined by my friend Justin Good, who is the co-director at a place called The Sanctuary at Shepherd Fields in East Haddam. The Sanctuary is an environmental education and spiritual life center. Justin is a philosopher and a professor adjunct at Wesleyan University and Middlesex Community College and the University of Connecticut. And our paths crossed some 10 years ago when I first started playing around in this realm of sustainability, started looking at this question of sustainability. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that. And it led me to know Justin and then ultimately to meet and know you, Guy, and your work. But really, as I got interested in this so-called field of sustainability, what I discovered quickly was that it was really about learning about the deeper reasons of why we are not sustainable in the first place. And really, if you take an unvarnished look at what's happening, the problems are deep, they're systemic, and really the only way to, if there is any way to address them at all, it's to acknowledge the roots of these issues. Some of the things that you'll talk about, Guy, I'm sure, are just the industrial growth system's voracious appetite for consuming resources and turning them into products that can be sold and turned into an abstract concept called money. And how misguided that is, and how we take real stuff we need for life to exist on the planet and literally destroy it and turn it into this thing called money, which is just something we made up. It's actually, I can see you smiling, Guy. So Justin and I crossed paths 10 years ago as I looked into this field, and he had been doing the same thing. And so we've gotten to know each other locally and have created a local currency system. And he, on his own, has come across your stuff, Guy, and shared it with his students for his sustainability classes that he teaches. So he's a little bit late, but he'll be here any minute. In the meantime, you've been touring around a little bit. You were in the area not too long ago. I think I missed you in Rhode Island. I missed you in Northampton as well. And you had I know in Northampton you had, I think, a powerful experience, and maybe you could share a little bit about that. Or maybe that's something that happens everywhere you go. When you bring this story and people hear it, the ones that are willing to listen to it. Here comes Justin, so thank you, Justin, for coming. We have right there. So Guy's just going to tell us a little bit about his recent travels, whether it's locally or what's been happening with you in terms of your touring and telling the story.
Hello, Justin.
Very pleased to meet you.
Well, it was about 2 years ago that I reached a pretty dramatic conclusion. And actually, I reached that conclusion in 2002 when I was working on a book about climate change. I was editing a book about climate change in 2002. And there wasn't really strong scientific evidence to support this notion at the time, but through connecting some dots and a little bit of intuition, I realized that we were headed for human extinction in the not too distant future as a result of climate change. And then shortly thereafter, I discovered the concept of global peak oil. Oil, it appeared, was about to peak, and that would cause industrial civilization to reach its overdue end. We would stop destroying every aspect of the living planet just to turn it into money, as you pointed out. And as a consequence, we would start living, quote, sustainably. And that was 2003, 2004. That was a long time ago. Since then, the system marches on and on and on. And it appears at this point that it's too late to turn the ship around, that even complete collapse of industrial civilization within the next 5 minutes still indicates that we've hit runaway greenhouse. It's too late to turn the ship around. We hit the iceberg a long time ago. The bow of the ship is the only thing showing at this point. We're about to run out of habitat for human beings on this planet. So I headed out for the northeastern United States in early April, made a stop in Chicago along the way, did a couple of presentations, did some studio time, had a nice video produced from that because it was in a studio, and traveled a little bit in New York, gave a few presentations, went to Ontario, delivered a few presentations in Canada as well. I was not well received in a town noted for its gold mining, by the way, where they really appreciate industrial civilization and the currency that results from that.
All right.
And went directly from there to the central coast of California, Santa Cruz, Monterey Bay area, and then shortly thereafter to Ecuador, where I delivered a presentation, helped somebody who's creating a homestead, did some free consulting work for her, and then did a grief recovery workshop with a colleague of mine. I'm recently certified in the grief recovery method by the Grief Recovery Institute, and after I speak, there's often a lot of grieving that results. So Absolutely. It seems appropriate that I should be able to address human emotions in light of the horrific conclusion I've reached, and that is at this point well supported by the evidence.
And not to mention, even if industrial civilization collapses in 5 minutes, there's the question of the 400 or so nuclear plants around the world that go uncontrolled. But before we get into that, did you want to respond to that?
That's right. There's the 407 nuclear power plants that would melt down catastrophically. Fukushima alone represents a significant threat to all habitat for humans in the northern hemisphere. And multiply that by several hundred, and you can see that we might be facing some serious problems. And we've triggered so many self-reinforcing feedback loops on the climate front that really climate change is feeding on itself. We can just get out of the way at this point, and it wouldn't really matter how many more fossil fuels we burned. It looks like we've triggered, for example, the Clathrate gun in the Arctic. So all kinds of problems in our not too distant future.
So I want to hear a little bit about those, but I want to give Justin a chance just to sort of offer sort of just where he's coming from tonight. And I'll just mention the introduction that I started with, because I wanted to, and I'll tie it back into what Guy just said, because our paths crossed as I started working in this field of sustainability. The idea that we could become sustainable was really what was driving me. In fact, I created an LLC and was looking to do business and be a consultant in that realm based on my experience and my skills and my interests. And you were in a I'm assuming a similar place, exploring this so-called field of sustainability. For me, it quickly turned into an exercise and an adventure of going more deeply into understanding why we're not sustainable. And actually, the more that I did that, the more, in a way, hopeless or the more difficult the problem became as it revealed itself. And that, I think that, and that's what Guy is saying, is that this is, it may in fact be the kind of problem that doesn't have a solution. And what happens when you start talking about a problem that doesn't have a solution? Your whole relationship to that problem has to change. It has to be about, so then what do I do today? How can I be? What's the best life I can have? How do I offer the best I have to offer to the world, even though it may not make a difference? So that's the introduction I wanted to offer from my perspective, and I'm curious about your experience, if it parallels that, or if you're in a similar place or a different place right now.
Mm-hmm. First, let me just say, Guy, I teach an environmental philosophy class at a community college, and I'm kind of on the adjunct circuit, and I've appreciated not only your sort of perspective on the climate change issue in literature, but what you've said about academia and your ideological issues. That's been helpful to me. I actually assigned one of your recent kind of surveys of the climate literature that you update periodically in one of my classes, and what's on my mind right now is actually, let me just say one other thing. I have been for a while struggling with how to teach these issues, and obviously not just depress the students, not to have them just crush or immediately get into a kind of a narcissus narcosis defensive trance and shut you out. How do you have them be able to look at it in a realistic way, accept what you're saying, and still have some sense of hope, not that things are going to get fixed, but that there's some meaningful, life-affirming response they can have to it. And one of your presentations that I watched, you kind of ended with this kind of, bringing back to gratitude, having gratitude for the life that exists right now, being true to your values, living the life you really want to live right now. I'm moving towards a question for you, but I'm not sure exactly what it is yet. But that's what my own teaching is. I've jettisoned even almost critical thinking at this point. Teaching mindfulness, non-judgmental observation. I feel like my task is to try to mentally prepare them through getting them to meditate, through getting them to appreciate well, you brought up gratitude, but gratitude has been described by many people as like the most spiritual mood to be in. That's where I am. Trying to, with where I'm involved with a kind of a lifeboat project, a nonprofit that holds a 40-acre land parcel in trust that we're trying to develop as a community lifeboat permaculture project. So I've been in survival mode for a while, but maybe here's a question for you. So a couple of things I want to throw out. One is the great sort of philosopher of science, Paul Feyerabend, said, there's something completely horrible about how our culture in the process has justified cultural murder by saying that, well, our science makes us have this unique perspective, and the indigenous perspective, which is, we would say, a more spiritualized view of nature, maybe there was something to that. Maybe there was a connection between that and their sustainability, their harmony. And there's a debate within permaculture between David Holmgren and who's the other guy, but about whether sustainability has to have this spiritual dimension to it. If that's part of our our I don't know, the psychology of sustainability. Here's one other thought. I'm sorry, I just have to get a couple other things out. You know, in Chief Seattle's letter to Chief Washington, he says that the coming of the Europeans is the end of living and the beginning of survival. You know, and there's something about the talk about sustainability is a kind of survival mentality to it. There's a larger, the spiritual version wants to say, well, there's more going on. There's a rejuvenation, there's a rediscovery. I know that you've been involved in certain maybe indigenous rituals of healing or nature spirituality. Maybe the question that's kind of leaking out towards Guy and to you, Mike, is how do we avoid, you know, kind of New Age narcissism and law of attraction kind of silliness, but still have draw some kind of energy and some peace that's not just about survival, because again, it's not really survival, but it's about living rather than just survival. You know, like we have to have a higher goal than just survival, it seems. And if survival is impossible, what's that right spiritual orientation?
So, and the thought I want to share, and before Guy jumps in, is that the capitulation that really is part of the story that Guy's put together and that I've been acknowledging and that you've been experiencing, there's a capitulation in that. There's a surrender to it, to the inevitability of it. And in a way, I want to say that, you know, maybe we can interpret that as the end of the survival mentality and the return to living, because that's really all that is left. And if there is anything to hope for, it's that in doing so, something could happen that we can't imagine that might make a difference. But it's not something we can think of. Mm-hmm. It's not something we can intellectually or scientifically determine. But if we can understand a way of releasing this grip on survival and returning to what Chief Seattle said about living, there might be a seed in there. What do you think, Guy?
Well, yes. In fact, I think my message is very liberating.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
We may need to reboot.
We lost him.
So, yep. Let's see if he comes back.
Did he say my message is very liberating?
Liberating, yeah.
Liberating.
So, we're connecting. While we're reconnecting, I want to let him give us just some of the hard facts and details too about the latest. One of the themes of the show I wanted to be was just an update on climate chaos. Because what he's done is take this story and he updates it on a regular basis with the latest scientific findings. New self-reinforcing loops are identified that add to the story. In a way, it's becoming almost silly, because it's a complete story just the way it is. But it keeps unfolding. New evidence keeps arriving, and I guess there's a role to simply report that, and to report it in relationship to the bigger story, which is what Guy has synthesized. So, except I'm thinking that this may. There he is. Hello, Guy. Sorry for the technical difficulty. Are you there?
Yes, I am. And if you can keep your video turned off, it might help. So.
Okay.
Oh, keep my video turned off.
We might have a little bit more bandwidth if you leave your video turned off.
Okay, I'm not sure how to do that. I don't have your video yet. My video is now turned off. Can you turn your video on? So while I do this, I'm going to try to get him on a video call. So let's see. Why I'm not able to do that call phone. Oh, I think I need some help from Bob Stoller. You want to work on that? And so we'll keep going. Oh, here he is now. Oh, there. Oh, I pushed the video camera button. You there, Guy?
Yes, I'm right here. If you could turn your video off. There we go.
There we go.
Have a little more bandwidth.
All right. So thank you, everybody, for putting up with that. And that may prevent us getting disconnected now that I've turned off our camera on this side. Okay.
This technology, it's cracked up to be,
So I'm looking at the monitor, and you look great. It's actually working very well, and so I want to thank the producers, because the last time we did this was maybe going on a year ago. I talked to a blank wall, and we had your voice, but we didn't have any video at all. So
right.
Thank you for Skyping tonight, and thank you, Justin, for being here as well, because the last time I don't think I had anybody in the studio with me. So I hope folks are still with us. This is a show about the latest news, and that's what I'm hoping Guy's going to give us a little more about, an update on climate chaos. What are the latest findings, and how do they relate to this bigger picture, this bigger story that Guy has assembled from all of this really scientific data? So this is not something that we're just making up, but rather assembling from some good science.
Well, in fact, I'm quite clear about that. This is not my message. I'm just accumulating information and transmitting that information. So really, I'm just connecting a few dots. And as I was saying before we got cut off, that connecting those dots leads to human extinction in the not too distant future if we maintain industrial civilization as a result of so many self-reinforcing feedback loops on the climate front, and as well as firing the class gun in the Arctic. Of course, if industrial civilization suddenly ceases, all the world's nuclear power facilities melt down catastrophically. And given that Fukushima alone represents a significant threat to human habitat in the Northern Hemisphere, I don't think we're going to do well
with multiple 100 nuclear plants melting down.
Well, technology.
Yeah.
It seems to connect, and then it.
So I have a feeling he's going to call back.
Yeah.
So what you're familiar with his work?
Yes.
Where does it leave you in terms of it? I mean, there's a finality to the way he describes it. One of the things I want to point out is that what I hoped to allow into the conversation tonight is this phrase, near-term extinction.
Yeah.
Because in my research, in my experience, this has now emerged as a conversation among the people that seem to be paying attention. The question I have, maybe for you guys that I hadn't thought of, is, well, there have been doomsayers for a long time.
Yeah.
So what makes this different, if anything? But in addition to that question is, so what is this conversation about so-called near-term extinction? The conditions for the higher life forms on the planet deteriorating so much within just a couple of decades, just a handful of decades. Where does that leave you, or do you buy into any of that, or?
I do. I think it's more likely than not. I heard one analysis that if you lose between 25 and 40% of the species, then the food chain collapses, and then you're up to 70% extinction. And clearly, we can't be growing food if that's happening.
Yeah, and I think threats to the food chain is a great aspect to bring up, because that you hear stories about that all the time, but putting those dots, connecting those dots, doesn't really often happen.
Right.
It's happening in the oceans right now.
I mean, I think the general orientation that civilization as we know it has existed within this relatively short, stable period of geological time. And the last time there was this much carbon in the atmosphere was 3 million years ago, and the oceans were 100 feet higher,
and humans weren't around.
And that's right, and it was inhospitable to us. So I do look at this from, I clearly haven't come to terms with it yet because I'm not starving yet, but it clearly is a meditation on death. I am a philosopher, and philosophy in the old time Socratic view is a preparation for dying. We do all have a meditation on our own death, and we're going through this as a culture. Could make us very philosophical as a culture.
Okay.
Hello.
Are we back again?
We are. There you are.
If the technology so desires.
So we were just touching upon sort of the finality of the way you talk about the story, and that I did have the hope that we could at least, the term near-term extinction could get introduced into this conversation, because I think it needs to be at least something that's on the table for people to be talking about. And so Justin picked up on that and was talking about sort of a philosophical question of contemplating death and what that might mean.
Well, I heard a story relatively recently. It's probably not even true, but I'm going to tell it as if it is. The Buddha asked one of his students how frequently he thought about death. The student says, "Oh, I think about death very frequently, dozens of times a day." The Buddha says, "It's not enough. You must think about death with every breath." The point is, the wolf is always at the door, right? That life is urgent, and we should live as if life is urgent. Because no matter how long we have in this mortal coil, it's not very long. A few people live to be the age of 100, and I'm guessing, and as nearly as I can tell based on what people say, in the end what we have is a relatively few memories. That's it. There's just not that much that we remember from a lifetime. And so what I try to encourage people to do is to create moments of joy for themselves and others, and to live as if your life matters, no matter how long. To live as if the lives of other people matter. To be present with people who are in your presence. And I don't think that's an indecent way to live, whether we have 5 years.
I think we ought to
sweet.
Get the phone, maybe we ought to get the phone link reconnected as well.
You just have him call in.
As a backup. I have to tell him that next time he calls back.
Yeah.
Okay. So I am Michael Harris. This is Thinking Green. We are intermittently talking with Guy McPherson, Dr. Guy McPherson, currently in New Mexico. Hello, Guy. Hey,
My apologies. Would you rather we do this on the phone?
Do you want to? We could try this one more time, but as a backup, if you want to dial in, we could have you maybe standing by on the phone as well, and if this is going to keep happening.
Okay.
So, is there a break, Bob, midway, or are we going straight through? Oh, okay. Well, we're just going to press on. So why don't you continue on with what you were saying, Guy, and we'll see how far we get.
So I thought, in the end, my message is one of living, pursuing a life of excellence, doing the work you love, spending time with those you love, and trying not to destroy the planet in your wake. And I think the message is quite liberating in that I'm encouraging people to do something beyond the mainstream. Most people capitulate to the mainstream because the mainstream is asking them to do that, and culture is pressing upon them to get the high-paying job at the cube farm and all that sort of thing. And I'm suggesting that your life span is way too short to spend your time doing that kind of work that you don't like in exchange for fiat currency which allows you to have a place to live and buy enough gas to go to work the next day. It seems sort of absurd to me.
Can I interject a vignette here?
Please.
Would you mind? I think it's a humorous story. I have been living to a certain extent what you just said, and trying some different jobs as what I call survival jobs. That in addition to whatever sort of thoughtful things I might do, I need to bring in a few dollars to pay the rent and buy some food. And so I made bread this past winter. Right now I'm driving a boat. It's a pump out boat, and we drive around to other boats and we remove the sewage from the boats. And I spend the whole day, and you might notice that I've been out in the sun all day today, outdoors on a boat on Mother Ocean, which from my perspective is a very emotional relationship. My sense of what's happening to the oceans is profound, profoundly sad, profoundly bittersweet and poignant. So to spend my days doing this is I think a powerful expression of what you just said. So 2 days ago, a gentleman on this big boat said to me, "I don't know how you can stand the smell all day." And I said to him, "Do you have a desk job?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, I don't know how you can stand that." And I didn't mean to be too curt or cute with him, but that was literally the point, what you just said, and it was my way of saying it in that moment.
Right. I mean, being part of civilization, even I've tried very hard. I spent 2 years trying my damnedest to walk away from civilization, to live completely outside of the system. And guess what? There's still taxes and insurance and things to be purchased. I mean, there's no escape from.
Yep. I think we're going to go
Darn it.
back to the phone. I know a little bit about that story, what Guy was talking about, his foray into homesteading. And I think he's at the homestead that he developed, but I think his relationship to that idea has changed. How about you? Have you had a similar, had any kind of similar experience with trying to, here he is, I'm asking Justin to see if he's had a similar experience with an evolving relationship with civilization and the dominant culture. I know I had to sort of break away and try to break its grip on me to a certain extent to learn to what extent I might do that, and then to return with a new consciousness.
You know, I would like to, on that issue, I would like to ask Guy, there's clearly a debate, can you have a mass extinction with tiny little pockets of survivors? Could there be little, I don't know, some kind of oases amidst the total destruction where there's some triage of human culture and back to some kind of gatherer-hunter existence, maybe with some more, you know, remnants of modern technology or whatever. Is there any realistic vision for survival of pockets of people who are not just in a lifeboat starving to death, but are living, I don't know, some kind of real life?
Well, I would consider a real life just about anything different than industrial civilization. And so I would argue that if there are any survivors, they will be people who are indigenous right now,
yeah,
who are in the southern hemisphere, where there are only 4 nuclear facilities of the 400 and some, and that they are already living very decent lives, and they're resisting civilization, which keeps trying to kill them or assimilate them. If there is a chance, that's where it is.
Right.
I don't know that there is a chance, given that, as Michael observed, the oceans are dying. It's difficult for me to imagine a scenario in which we have human beings on a planet with a dead ocean, or even with an ocean dominated by jellyfish, instead of an incredibly biologically diverse system. Also, it appears that we fired the clathrate gun based on an abundance of refereed journal literature.
So tell us what that means, Guy. Fired the clathrate gun.
Well, clathrates are cages around methane molecules. Methane is CH4, and there are methane clathrates, or sometimes called hydrates, in the relatively shallow Arctic Ocean. And so these clathrates have been stored there for millions of years, and just a little tiny bit of warming is sufficient to cause the clathrates to bubble up and then to have the chemical cage break and release the clathrates directly into the ocean or directly into the atmosphere. Critically important papers on this topic have appeared in Science, Nature, Geophysical Research Letters, and Global Policy, as well as information from NASA's CARVE project. NASA's CARVE project reported in summer of 2013 methane plumes coming out of the Arctic Ocean 150 kilometers across. So it appears that we have fired the clathrate gun. This is the self-reinforcing feedback loop James Hansen was particularly worried about in his 2009 book, Storms of My Grandchildren. Well, it appears now that we fired the clathrate gun, probably in 2007 or a little sooner. So what that means is methane is going directly into the atmosphere at an accelerating rate. Methane is more than 100 times more powerful a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, molecule for molecule, in the short term. It breaks down relatively quickly in the atmosphere, a half-life of a few years, but it breaks down into carbon dioxide. So there is tremendous heating potential associated with methane release, and it's being released not just from the Arctic Ocean, but also from the permafrost and from Antarctica as well. And so that's the clathrate gun. It appears that we've fired the clathrate gun. An analysis of that single self-reinforcing feedback loop suggests that we could, in fact, go Venus. And we're within 1% of the habitability range for a planet as far away from our sun, with the intensity of the sun that we have. Being within 1% of being uninhabitable suggests that we need to make only relatively minor changes in atmospheric chemistry before it pushes us out of the habitable zone. And we haven't made minor changes in atmospheric chemistry. We've made major changes in atmospheric chemistry. We've increased methane 250% in the last 150 years. We've increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere more than 40% in the last 150 years. So it's pretty clear that we've made major changes in atmospheric chemistry. There's an abundance of literature suggesting we fired the clathrate gun. All of that leads to a planet not habitable by humans in the not too distant future, and perhaps by a great number of other organisms as well.
I just want to touch on, just for folks that may be familiar with this topic, in terms of the 350.org message and 350 parts per million as a target that beyond which we've got serious problems. And where are we today in terms of parts per million carbon in the atmosphere? And when was the last time that occurred in the history of the Earth? Do you know the answers to those questions?
Yeah, we're right at 400 parts per million carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That'll be, according to a paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences from February 2009, that's the minimum level of carbon dioxide we'll observe in the atmosphere for at least the next 1,000 years. Carbon dioxide is very recalcitrant in the atmosphere. It's going to be there for a long time. We have never had a planet with humans at 400 parts per million. We have only recently had a planet with humans at 350 parts per million. And we're not going to see 350 parts per million for, again, at least the next 1,000 years, unless we come up with fantasy technology that we just haven't thought of, much less invented yet. I don't know when was the last time we had 400 parts per million, but there were no humans to see it. We're headed for a world without ice in the Arctic Ocean, at least in September, in the very near future, and that hasn't happened in human history either. And so these are significant events, unparalleled in human history, that suggest that humans won't be able to survive those kinds of planetary conditions. I mean, the Arctic is planetary air conditioner, and just a little bit of ice there goes a long way. And getting rid of all that ice means that the incoming radiation is not going to be used to melt ice, it's going to be used to heat the ocean and then heat the planet. That's hugely problematic.
So we have 5 minutes left after that establishing, and I did want to ask a question too, maybe you could respond to that, but I'll make it 2 questions. The first is going to be, what do we want to do with those 5 minutes, given what you just said, Guy? But before that, I had wanted to ask you, and I don't know if you have a response to this, but it's sort of a question that comes up for me. And it's the idea that there have been doomsayers for forever. And what makes this different, if anything?
Well, in some way, it's not different at all. In a very important way, it's quite different in that I am simply connecting the scientific dots put out by other individuals. We have never had a planet Earth with human beings on it at 3.5 degrees centigrade above baseline, meaning at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. We're at 0.85 C now, and the firing the Clathrate gun alone takes us to 4 C or so by 2030. According to a relatively recent analysis. And I realize that's only 15 years or so. On the one hand, it's fairly similar in that we've always been doomed, right? I mean, as a species, we've always been doomed. All species go extinct. As individuals, of course, we're going to die. Birth is lethal. By definition, when you come into this planet, you start dying. And so the doomsayers have been right all along, that sure enough, we're all going to die. What's different this time is that there's tremendous scientific evidence to suggest that we won't have humans for very long. What do we do in the time remaining? For me, what I used to say, I used to be the uber rational scientist, and I'd give this information, and I'd tell people, you're all going to die, and it's going to happen pretty soon, and I got to go catch my plane. I was like a really bad medical doctor who had a golf round coming up, and so he would just tell the patient with the most horrible bedside manner ever, it looks like there's a 99% chance you're going to die in 6 weeks. Oh, and I got to get my golf game. You can pay on the way out. And then it was pointed out to me that that wasn't very good bedside manner, that I might want to work on that. And so over the last year or so, I've been integrating this notion that we've never had long, that we should pursue a life of excellence, that we should, along the way toward pursuing a life of excellence, we should pursue love as well. Do what we love, spend time with those we love, act as if we don't have forever in this mortal coil, because we don't. Yeah. And so for me, that's the take-home message, is that we don't have long, we've never had long, as a species, as individuals, as civilization, however you want to stack that. And that it doesn't really matter, as far as I'm concerned, that we should pursue lives of excellence. We have 5 minutes or 50 years remaining.
Yeah. So I want to ask Justin, what will you do when you walk out of the studio? How does this, or how have you integrated this same sort of information from your, the way you've put it together, and how does it impact you, and how has your life expression changed either from that process or from this moment forward?
I mean, just listening to what Guy said, I totally concur. I feel like it makes me think that this is just what we need, for self-knowledge, for not that it's good or bad or something like that, but it's an enormous impetus for our own growth.
Yeah, the absence of the judgment there, I noticed, and not that it's good or bad, because it is what it is, and what will we do with it? I want to thank Dr. Guy McPherson for calling in and being persistent with the Skype so that we could see his face as well as hear his voice. Thank you so much, Guy, and for sharing what you've learned and your perspective. And Justin, thank you for going out of your way to come down here from East Haddam. from the sanctuary at Shepherd Fields, where they're doing work that addresses this and how to live a life of excellence. My name is Michael Harris. I'm so pleased to be able to offer intermittent guest hosting of the Thinking Green TV show. The plant just disappeared. I think that's a sign. We're going to wrap things up, and thank you for watching.
Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome, Justin.
That was fun.
It was interesting.
Yeah.
And we may still be
On the air.
on. I don't know. I'm never quite sure if they're ready for me to pull the cord.
You are still on. I'll let you know when we go to the calendar. Just keep talking.
Okay.
It is a kind of a paradox that you can become more alive by focusing on death. You know.
It is,
true.
and I think it's the paradox that's laid before us to open ourselves to and struggle with, if you have to use that term, to come to a place of a reacquaintance with the mystery of being spiritual beings and manifest on the physical plane. And so I think I had to say that I wanted to say this earlier, that this topic, it's always had a spiritual component, and I can't imagine not recognizing that if you open yourself up to what this realm of this question of sustainability is all about. I just can't imagine not recognizing the spiritual component of that question.
You can say goodbye.
I would agree too.
Okay, so there's a little extra there we gave you. We're going to say goodbye now, and thank you so much for joining. I hope that you enjoyed the show, and you can let the folks here know that you want to hear more of things like this.
We'll be back in October.
Pick and choose your chemicals wisely. The body only takes so much. Take charge of your life and live it wildly, like I've done.